Hello, everybody. Episode 8, I believe. So today is going to be an interesting one, and I'm pretty excited about it. I've been trying to get Russell on the podcast for quite a while. He and I go way back to high school, in fact. So we met in high school, and we've gone through high school together. I taught him how to drive a stick shift car. I remember in an alley where some dude called us Russians and told us to go back to the country where we came from, and we ended up slashing his tires. And this is like 30 years ago. And so since then, I've worked with Russell for 13 years. The way that relationship started is I used to build websites, and back in early 2000s, Russell and a couple of partners started selling flash memory when flash memory was a small, cheap enough to ship object that was fairly high priced. And so they're like, oh, it's a great business idea because there's all these digital cameras and there's all these applications, and all the computers need upgrades. And so they started selling memory first, and they got into flash memory. And at some point somebody asked, do you sell flash drives? And then at some other point somebody said, do you sell flash drives with logos on them? And so Russell was like, I'll build a website for that and we'll see where that thing goes. And so he called me, and while I worked my collections job at night, I built a website, which then they launched. And I said, if you have a job for me at some point, I'm happy to work for you. And I think 2 days later, he basically said, why don't you quit? Because we got like 10 leads. And the infamous story from that point on is it was a room with a computer on it, in it, and we're like, what do we do with these leads? And so we went to Barnes and Noble, or Borders, actually.
It was Borders.
Yeah, it was Borders. And so we went to Borders and we bought a couple of sales books, and I was like, I'll read one and you read the other one, and let's reconnect tomorrow and see where the hell this thing goes. And then we got into printing flash drives, and then we got into OEM product manufacturing, where we made flash drives in different shapes. Then we got into applications where we made these flash drives not for promotional purposes, but more for integrated solutions into like things like dialysis machines and Harley Davidson motorcycles.
Cameras, that kind of stuff, yeah.
Yeah, and then, as we started kind of blogging about it and putting up Flickr pictures, all these individual users were like, hey, where can we buy these flash drives? And we're like, well, we kind of sell it business to business, and we have no idea. So why don't we start a consumer channel? And so we got into licensing, and then we picked up Game of Thrones license. Actually, the first one we picked up was Miss America license. Then we picked up Game of Thrones. We picked up Walking Dead, Ash versus Evil Dead, True Blood, and a ton of other kind of entertainment properties, which then got us into retail, which then got me to packaging. And so 13 years in, I basically brought a bunch of tubes into Russell's warehouse, and he helped me launch my company, which then I ended up leaving him and doing that for 10 more years. And so since then, obviously, the flash market has changed, and kind of the whole business that Russell and his partners were running. By that time, it was one partner, actually. And so that's a separate story, probably. But by that time, the market has changed. Obviously, in 2004, when I started Flash, we sold $65 128 megabyte flash drives to Ball State University. And, when I left, those were like no longer available, and now 16 gigabytes were like $3. And so obviously there was, the market normalized, and the product changed, and so I think Russell's business has changed. And so I'm going to pass it on to him to kind of tell us what he does now and how he got there, and what does it all mean for the future.
Well, thanks, Nadim. Well, what I first just wanted to start out that just by saying that, yeah. So we started out. First of all, the Ball State University. You're right. That was our first actually big order that we knew there was going to be something. And I remember that it was $305,000.
Yeah.
And it was, except they weren't 128; they were 1 gigs. They were $65 1. Yeah, they were $65 1 gigabyte USB drives. That's what we sold them for at the time, and just because they were super expensive. Just memory at the time. Memory was like a It was, if you remember, it was like a legitimate purchase. Somebody had to consider that along with, like, if you're buying a camera, you're also considering a memory card as like a separate purchase that you have to put into your budget. You're buying a $300 camera. A card is going to cost you $150, $200. You're looking for, 50 to about 75% of the original purchase price being added on top. So it was a significant business. Yeah, and the way we got into CustomUSB, which was the thing that the website you built originally, was we had enough customers coming to us asking for just memory, but personalized or customized, let's say, to them, right? So they would use it in Ball State, I believe, it was just that. It was, if you remember, I think it was an order where they just put the stuff, they bought the product and they just like labeled it and put it in their bookstore.
I believe they actually sent it to incoming students. It was like one of the things that they started with, or maybe they just gave it to students. I don't even remember. I mean, we're talking 20 years ago at this point.
We're talking 2004, I want to say.
4 or 5, something like that, right?
At least 19, 20 years ago. It's been a while, so that's fair. But in any case, so I do those days were sort of far behind us, but they taught us a lot of lessons, and I think that as we kind of started moving up market and understanding, at least trying to understand, we had no real formal training in any of it. So one of my favorite stories is the border trip. I remember that border trip. That store has now been turned into it's been so long ago. It just tells you like how long it's been. That store's now been turned into a medical clinic, I believe.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's and I remember buying a couple books, right? And we, just as you just told it, we kind of went our separate ways, read it, and then the next day we get together and said, "Hey, so what'd you learn? What do we do now? Now that we have these leads, how do we sell this stuff better? What does sales mean? Like, I think we need a CRM system. It's like, what do we do? I don't know. Let's find one. How do we keep track of all these people?" So I remember we had Goldmine at the time. That was a CRM system, and that's like the thing that basically. Yeah, no, that was the thing you actually helped. So you did a lot of the work on it, whereas you figured out like the original SOP on it, right? Which is like the
process.
This is how you enter. This is how you started. Yeah, like, how do you enter a lead in? What does it mean to have a lead, right? What does a prospect look like, right? And then us learning to talk to customers and sort of like that was a great way to kind of get started in business. You got to get started. At the end of the day, you got to start somewhere, right? So it's a great place to get started, right? It's always looking back on it. I mean, one of my favorite sayings that I've learned: if you look back onto what you've done and you're not embarrassed by it, you didn't try hard enough.
Interesting.
You have to look. Yeah, you have to look back, because like some of the stuff, I look back at some of the stuff. Like copywriting works that way, right? When you should be able to look back at some of the copy you've written for your business, for example, even like for Paper Tube, right? You should look back like 2 years later at the original copy and go, man, and like be embarrassed by it. Like it should feel like whoa. But
I had a progress. Yeah, I had a George Carlin quote on my website, and then I had...
I remember that quote, yeah.
Because initially when we started the Paper Tube Company and we wanted to showcase that we could print logos on them, in fact, I was using your laser engraver back in the day to put logos on that thing. And I didn't have any logos to start with because we had no customers. And so I'm like, all right, what's a recognizable logo? And so I went to back to the entertainment. I had like Vandelay Industries on it, or Mugatu, just so people can like relate.
Which was great, actually. I thought that if anything, it captures. It's actually intuitively, that was a really great idea, because what it does is, and for anyone listening, I think it's a great lesson, right? So the idea is that you can take, you don't need a million. Everybody goes, man, how do I get started if I don't have a million customers already, right? How do I get engagement? How do I get people to like pay attention to me? It's a great story, because it shows you that you don't actually need, all these customers that you can then put up on your website to say, look at who I've done stuff for. You can be absolutely tongue-in-cheek about it and it shows off your creativity, and it shows off sort of ingenuity, and at the same time what you can do. And the customer looks at it and goes, well, these people are clever, they are creative, and they're interesting, and
they're human.
And you got their attention. Absolutely, and they're human, and you got their attention, and that is the whole point. Which means that at this point, I now know that you're about 50% of what I need. Right. So even if you've never done it before, this is a great example of essentially how to break, start somewhere. Right. Starting is the hardest part. And this is actually, you've intuitively figured out what had to be done, which is actually really cool.
Yeah.
Because people see Mugatu, they go, wow, that guy's funny. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they see, what was the other brand you said?
Vandelay Industries.
Yeah. Vandelay Industries. That's a Seinfeld quote. That's a Seinfeld company. It's fantastic. I mean, it's awesome. Like, to this day, you show this to somebody, it'll get their attention.
Yeah, absolutely.
In fact, I haven't thought about this, but we should probably create some, gifts with those brands just to see what happens.
That's not a bad idea, actually.
We had an idea. We had some like early renderings of stuff that we did. with a gift for the financial services industry for a company called E&J Entertainment. And if that
That sounds
sounds familiar,
familiar.
well, it's not. I don't know if it's an actual real company or not, but E&J Entertainment was the entertain. We'll call it an entertainment provider for the Wolf of Wall Street. Um, and it basically said, "Hey, thanks for being the best customer," and it said, and the customer was Stratton Oakmont.
That's pretty funny.
So yeah, so we put that on the site. It was really cool. So some people actually got it when they saw it. It was fantastic, and the customers laughed. They thought it was awesome. They thought it was a great way to get started before we basically had any like real customers at GildedBox.
It's very relatable because I think initially when you're getting started, you're obviously not looking to trap, Fortune 1,000 companies. What you're trying to do actually is carve out a niche that nobody else is serving. And for me, like, for example, that niche was like short run, small business, again, like owner purchased projects. And so when I was
I'll say that even in a shorter way. I think for what you guys said is basically you were serving the need for premium packaging with limited overall budgets where they were willing to pay a lot per unit. They just didn't have a lot of units to buy.
Correct.
So you were looking, your customer people who basically had a need for premium packaging. They just had a lot of product risk because they didn't really have a giant production setup, and they weren't actually really sure. They didn't have a lot of probably capital to go into and buy 10,000 candles or whatever they were making at the time. But to make their product work, it needed to be premium to start. So even though 10 units or 20 units or 50 units needed to be premium feeling. So that is actually the market you ended up getting at. To some degree, what we do today is actually not unlike that, in that sense, where except that need apparently is useful with the big companies as well.
Right.
But with GildedBox, essentially, we've been able to kind of pioneer the whole no minimums, you can just buy one personal thing and have it be highly premium and kind of have it made on demand. But that's essentially the market, right? What you're describing is you fit a very useful profile for people. Like you basically serve you solved a problem in the market, and the problem was I'm launching a product, or I have already a product that works, but I need to take it up market. I need to make it more premium. I already have some customers, but now it needs packaging, it needs to look good. But I can't invest thousands into design, and then on top of that, after I invest thousands, I now have to buy a lot of it and stock it for inventory, which I don't even know if I'm going to be business. No space. I don't know. I don't have that many candles to stuff sort of in my proverbial tubes, So like,
right.
It wouldn't really make sense. So it would just be a giant commitment to them and a big risk ultimately. So you ended up de-risking a lot you ended up de-risking that part of the business a lot for your customer. And at the end of the day, it probably let them start a business. It gave them an easier path forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you mentioned GildedBox. What do you guys do? What's a GildedBox?
What is GildedBox? Sure. So GildedBox was born out of, I guess, before you can talk about GildedBox, you got to quickly just go back to CustomUSB for a second. GildedBox was we will call it's a phoenix that rises from the ashes of what CustomUSB was supposed to be, right? So CustomUSB was a company that allowed us to learn a lot of things, right? And that's the company you helped us start. But if you think about how we built it, right? We never built it actually. One of the most important lessons we've learned is that you have to build a company to solve a specific problem, and a specific problem as is defined by a specific customer subset, right? So you can't just say, hey, we're really good at this one product, and then we're going to sell it to anybody who wants it, which is exactly what we did with CustomUSB. If somebody asked me,
yeah.
Well, no one explained this, right? But like, I thought whenever somebody asked me, I never thought this question was always weird to me when we were just starting out, right? They're like, but some people would come to me and they go, well, who's your customer, right? And I would look at them like funny. I go, what do you mean?
Anybody that needs promos.
Anybody who, no, that would actually mean something. I would say anybody who needs USB drives. What are you, stupid? Like, why are you asking me this? He's like, what do you mean? My customers, anybody who buys USB drives. It was kind of like, and I thought like they were crazy, right? But in reality, like they actually were asking a very specific question that I didn't know how to answer, but I didn't know it at the time, right? It's like one of those things where you don't know what you don't know. So at the time, my answer was always just like, what do you mean? Anybody who needs USB drives. So what we did is, what ended up happening is we served no market. But we served every market. We served every market as a fragment, but we weren't targeted at anybody, which means that when you're for everyone, you're for no one. And that was probably the we'll say the fatal flaw of the business. Now, considering that was the fatal flaw, we actually did fairly well with it.
Yeah.
Given the circumstances and considering that it was really basically one product.
It was very organic. It's like the growth is organic. We didn't really target market anything. We just kind of threw up keywords, custom USB drives, and then plus the name obviously helped. But it was
It
it was
helped.
just a
It
just
helped.
a hot item at a time. We kind of got lucky to some degree.
I mean, that's look, that's I guess where luck is where preparation meets opportunity. Sure. And of course you need luck. Luck is, I mean, that helps. Definitely helps. Um, but I think the big thing is, like, could this have been some bigger business? I think probably. I think the reality is it could have been something a lot bigger if it was targeted and built correctly.
Hmm.
If it was, let's say, targeted more the thing we really wanted to be, which is like the OEM market, you
Right.
know. But the irony is, and this is where GildedBox comes in. So by us sort of, try to service everyone, at some point we figured out that, like, okay, well, we don't want the product to just come from China, right? Because initially you start out selling, the product from China and just reselling it to your customers here. Well, we figured we couldn't control it very well. So, and then we got tired of the customer complaints, because if you sell enough of the stuff, you get, okay, so some, just some percentage goes bad, and deals go bad in China, and the products that come from China are not very good, and, like,
Shipping costs. There's like a lot of things.
it's
Absolutely.
inconsistent. So when you add all these things together, it just makes up for the price difference that you end up paying in the U.S. versus what you pay in China. You add all of it together, not just the shipping cost, but the total, obviously, the cost of, like, screwing up an order for the client consistently, losing the customer in the long run, and so forth. You go, look, why don't we do this better? So over time, we basically learned, so, okay, what happens if we try to build this ourselves? We have to kind of standardize the product, right? So what we ended up doing is we said, okay, so we have to figure out how we can build kind of everything uniformly. So how do we do this? We have made a contract with one memory manufacturer in Taiwan, and then we ended up engineering actually a bunch of USB cases to match the memory, right? So then we can use that memory. So the drives would look different. So basically, the case would look different, but the drives would be they'd all use the same memory.
Interchangeable. Yeah.
So then we can use economies of scale and buy large volume, get a better price, and control for quality. So specifically, because that way you don't have to worry about quality from different memory manufacturers. You're buying from the best one, and it's always the same, and you can vouch for it. That's how we were able to offer lifetime warranties and so forth. And the product is really excellent. And because of that, we still have customers that come back to us and buy, right?
Right.
We still have customers that specifically this product is really good for the OEM business. We thought that was the killer application, and that's really what it should have been. Now, on top of that, because we wanted to service every market, we also had to learn to assemble the drives, obviously, and print and package them, which is really
Hmm.
where the interesting stuff came in, right? So this is where we ended up developing printing methods. We ended up developing sort of like becoming sort of good at
But the production
digital
side
manu-
of things.
yeah, like understanding how to make something, understanding how graphics work. So we got design and all that stuff. So
And then
that is
standardizing it all too, because that's the biggest thing is, how do
yeah
you
that so
how do you
that's the
replicate it?
back end. That is the back end of GildedBox. That is essentially, so as we develop these skills, um, you know, we were kind of, as we were applying them on custom USB. 2020 happened. In
Hmm.
2020, we had the pandemic, and during the pandemic, we lost about 80% of our business because we weren't a true promo provider. I mean, we were, promotional products actually. All the, we were providing a lot of products for trade shows. Trade shows went away, so that part of the business kind of died, and a lot of the companies or OEMs that were making product couldn't make it anymore. The camera manufacturers, the dialysis, machine manufacturers, as you mentioned, recording equipment. All those people basically went, they went home. They couldn't make their stuff anymore. People didn't know what was going to happen. So we lost about 80% of our business, like around March,
Hmm.
in April time when COVID hit in 2020, and that was really a wake up call, obviously. It was very scary at the same, because we spent a lot of time building it, but also it was like an aha moment, which is like, maybe this business isn't as strong as we think it could be, or it should have been, because usually events like COVID are accelerants of something that was going to happen anyway, right?
Right.
So we try to view it in the positive light, which is all it was is just accelerated something that was inevitable anyway.
Yeah.
So we said, okay, so what can we do to use our, what do we do so well already that we could use our skills now to, like, and then who would actually, and what kind of problem can we solve? So as we started testing and figuring this out, this took about a year to just learn how to ask that question properly. So from 2020, that entire year we ended up scrambling, cutting our staff, furloughing people. I mean, there was, a lot of a lot of PPE. We went down that route,
Yeah.
using a lot of our
Masks and
channels.
yeah.
Yeah, so we have a lot of, obviously, we had a lot of Chinese and Taiwanese contacts, so we used a lot of that to be able to procure and leverage, our ability to get PPE product that a lot of people couldn't, and bring it in. But that was actually we'll sell a net neutral proposition. That it was still painful. Like, things that were valid one day weren't the next. I mean, it was insanity. It was, in retrospect, it would have been better to do nothing. It would have been way more profitable. And
Yeah, it's kind of like you're standing at a light and you're basically trying to like bypass on other streets, and by the time you actually pass through all those streets, the light turns green. It
yeah,
feels like
yeah,
you're moving, but the time is the same.
but you're not. Yeah, but you're not. And it probably. So we probably ended up spending more money to get there anyway. So at the end of the
Because
day,
you're burning
we're spending
gas.
more. Because you're burning gas, yeah. So we would have been better off not doing that. But in retrospect, I like to say always, whatever you try to do, at the end of the day, your business will grow or you will, right?
So you grew.
So yeah, that was one of those scenarios where we grew, not the business. But you get something out of it either way. So and that was the time that was right around, those 2020 was like that. And at the beginning of 2021, I said, okay, so what can we do with all of these things that we developed that, like, and at the end, we didn't know what was going to happen with COVID and a lot of people working from home now. And at the time, the whole like swag industry was started to kind of really take, so it's not promo. We really differentiate between those two. Swag is more specific. If promo is like for literally for advertising and for, for trade shows, and swag was really kind of the industry that was really for, like, we'll call it
Brand.
corporate merchandise. It's
Mm-hmm.
more like, so if you work at, Meta, you get a bunch of Meta branded stuff, right? It's really targeted at employees. It's really targeted for a way to turn an employee into a fan of the company. So,
Culture
but
building, brand equity, things
sure,
like that.
sure, it's generally, but swag is generally, at least as we define it here, is generally employee facing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we said, well, what can we do? And we didn't really understand at the time, but, like, what can we do? Because that business started to take off for most people, and we actually started to see a rebound because we had people starting to come to us, our old customers, going, "Well, do you guys do anything else? Because you guys make some really amazing, like, printed stuff, but, like, it's only USB drives. What else can you do?" Um, and it started giving us pause. Like, look, we have all these processes we've developed. We understand packaging. We understand printing really well. We understand, even products and manufacturing. Like, how do
Assembly,
we,
yeah.
yeah, how do we leverage that into something outside of USB drives and build, and plus our customers are not coming to us and going, "Can you do this?"
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we're like, okay, so we started kind of dabbling in swag a bit, trying to figure out what that even meant, getting it in other places and kind of building stuff around this. We started selling some, the typical standard corporate merch, some water bottles, some, just stuff like that, and kind of packaging it and making the corporate, we'll say corporate. I hate to call it a corporate gift box because we define that as something else today.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, as we kind of experimented with it, the idea came about of being able to build a real corporate gifting business. As we started playing with it, we realized one sort of undeniable truth, and that is that there's a giant difference. People called it corporate gifting, and we just knew that didn't feel right to us. It just didn't feel right. Like, the gifting part wasn't gifting. It never felt like gifting. Um, so we thought that corporate gifting was different from swag and was different from promo. We thought that actually all three of those things, they were different because they had different purposes. All right, so we said that promo is advertising, like straight up advertising. It's when you have no relationship. It is the equivalent of your business card, just on a product.
It's like marketing,
And
basically. It's like for promo, you look at like ROI, right? It's you actually measure. I bought a bunch of promos. I gave them at a trade show. This is how many leads it generated. That was a great marketing attempt.
correct, correct. It's just a way to get your name in front of people. And it's, people started to use it interchangeably. It was like gift, which is weird to me because I'm like, your business card is not a gift. Your pen with your name on is also not a gift. I don't understand why
It's
you
not
call
a
that a
gift.
gift. It's just, yeah, because they have different purposes, right? So
Have a
but
drawer full of gifts.
yeah, I have a drawer full of gifts, right?
Right.
So, and swag was like, we're like, well, no. But the swag people go, no. Pens and corporate promo aren't a gift. A real gift
Polos
is
with logos and shit and frisbees that
right.
say
It's
meta
got to
on
be.
them. They're also not a gift.
They have to be. Yeah, well, that was their argument. It's like, no, it's got to be nice. It's got to be a polo that's like a Lululemon. Then it's a gift. Well, like, yeah, maybe. I mean, it's nicer than it's better. It's definitely nicer. It's just, but the way we see it, I don't think it's a gift. It's still so. If it's nicer, then the opposite would also be true, which is like a pen is just, it's not really, because it's not a nice pen, makes it just a bad gift. Well, no, it's just automatically just not a gift because you're branding on it and all this other stuff. So it's just so the way we see that is just nicer advertising, not a nicer gift. Right? It's just better Like basically, it's more expensive, nicer advertising. But if you're giving me a polo with your brand on it, because flip that around, right? So why does corporate gifting have to behave any differently than your personal gifting, than your personal life? When I say personal gifting, nobody ever thinks of giving people things with their name on it. That seems weird, right?
Hey,
Yeah, imagine showing up at my house, right? And you give me a housewarming gift and it says Vadim on it, right?
happy birthday, Russell.
Right.
That's
Hey,
funny.
I wanted to congratulate you on buying your house, and it's like a box with your name on it, and like
That's like my
and
face
then
is
like
printed on it.
yeah, your face is printed out. It's like, hey, good to see you. So it's obvious because well, you go that we're taking it to its extreme. It's funny, but it's also there's a lesson in it, right? Which is like you're taking it to kind of an extreme, but at the same time, it just highlights the fact that the goal is clearly the same, but the execution is very different, right? The
Right.
goal of a customer gift and the goal of a personal gift is exactly the same, actually. The goal is the operative word in corporate gifting isn't corporate, it's gifting,
It's
right?
gifting, right?
The idea is that the person in your corporate world or your life has the same problem that like your personal, that you do in your personal life, which is like you're trying to build a connection, you're trying to build a relationship, you're trying to tell the other person this, look, I really care what you think of me, which is why I'm giving you this. So all the details here are, and the details get noticed, right? Otherwise, you could just give them cash, right? It's one of those things where like, and nothing says they want to care about you, but I don't, like a gift card, you know? And that's
Cash is
essentially,
nice.
sure.
So are coupons.
Yes, or coupons, right? Those are nice too, but it's actually the equivalent, right? That's kind of the point. Like, imagine giving cash to your wife for a birthday. It's like the point is if you think about it, it's just not really a gift. Those are different
No.
things. So, and gifting is, gifting is one of the least efficient economic things human beings do. However, it's not meant to do that. It's replacing, economies of scale with like, love and affection. That's kind of the whole
Yeah.
point. Is you're
Yeah.
trying to do something inefficient deliberately. The whole point of gift is effort. The whole point of a gift is effort. It's not actually it's not the gift itself. It's the effort that it took. So people usually, confuse that for the amount of money it could be approximated with dollars. We could say it that way, meaning that the more expensive of the thing I give you, because it took me lots of effort to earn those dollars. So I can then, for some people, it depends how much you make, obviously, but somebody that I know makes, $50,000 a year and they're giving me a $5,000 gift. That is a giant gift for them. I understand what that means.
But it has to be relevant still. It can still be an irrelevant gift.
Well, that's the other part of it, right? But I'm saying, but my point is that you're trying to first approximate effort with dollars a lot of times, and I just think that that's like, it works, but only to a degree, right? So again, dollars are usually meant to, in a gifting scenario, dollars are meant to approximate the
Value of a
let's say
relationship.
they're usually the depth, not the value, because you're not trying to say. But the idea is that like you don't like if you have a brand new relationship and you just met this, let's say it's a girl, right? You're not gonna give her like a $5,000 thing from like on the first date. It's just weird. I mean, it is. I
Not
mean,
me,
yeah, no, I got it.
but people
Most,
do.
I know. But generally speaking, if she's like normal, especially if you met her like under normal circumstances, she's gonna think that you're trying too hard at best, and that you're just like trying to buy her at worst.
It has a negative effect at a certain point because then it's like,
Yeah.
are you trying to bribe me? Like, what are you trying to do here?
Absolutely. And there is such a thing as too much, right? That's the other thing is like there's no, like and unless it comes to basically your wife pretty much, and your kids. That's the only people there's no such thing as too much when it comes to dollars. Everything else actually has like, a dollar limit to it that is basically like a number that's too high. Right?
Right.
Everything else just as a number is too little. All right. So basically if you have, your wife, your kids, and all those people I mentioned, the number can still be too little.
Right.
But the irony is, the range is much higher for your wife and your kids, right? So that means they're not going to be mad at you for a $10 thing, whereas your customer might be.
Yeah,
That's
but your customer who you're giving a disproportionate gift that doesn't match the relationship level has a negative effect because then they're gonna feel indebted to you, or they're gonna feel like you also don't want to create that feeling where there's guilt.
They're going to see it. They're going to 100% see it as a bribe. And there's no two sort of there's no two ways about it. They're going to absolutely see it as a bribe. Usually, so we see our customers typically, so what we see our customers typically do is the dollars approximate sort of like the value of the relationship, but in a way that like, based on like how much they spend with them, based on, how long they've been customers and so forth, right? So if you have, like we have customers that have, other customers that are about, let's say, like it's a customer of ours that has, let's say they're in the gas and the oil industry, and and they have, let's say, they service, it's a, it's a like a service business, where they service, some equipment that these oil rigs. Seems, simple enough. And they have 10 customers, and each customer brings in $2 million a year for them. That's it. That's their whole business. Right? It's a $20 million business that's split between 10 customers. That is it. Small company.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But they can't give any one of those customers anything less than $1,000. They're spending $2 million a year with them. Like,
right.
What do you tell a guy to spend less than 1,000? But you can't spend 100,000 on him either. It's too much.
Yeah. No jets.
Right. No jet. Right. You just can't do that. Right. So like the idea is just to make sure that the effort is visible, that you're like, no, I clearly see that the thing first of all, you being my customer is super valuable to me. I need you to know that you're a tenth of my business. Like,
right.
And without you basically, and 9 other people like you, I don't eat.
Right.
And I'm very thankful that you're here.
Right.
So
without creating a feeling that I'm being overcharged.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. It has to be. It shouldn't feel like I'm trying to give money back to you because I charge you too much. It shouldn't feel like I'm trying to pay you back in that way. It should feel like I'm thankful, not guilty. Right. That's the point. The value exchange should be evident here without the gift. The gift should be something that's on top. Having great gifts does not excuse you to have shitty services. Right. Or having those aren't the same things. Right. So the assumption is that the thing you provide is already really good. That's why you have these. We always teach our customers to do this. We always teach them that, like, you want to make sure you're gifting to the people you already have great relationships with, because it helps you create deeper relationships. Right? They already know who you are. That's why gifting is acceptable. Right? Anywhere else, if they don't know who you are, if you're trying to acquire people, and again, there's room for an acquisition, but it's going to be clear market. Like, it's going to be very hard for you to say, no, I really care. Like, it's hard to call it gifting at that point. It starts falling into a gray area where it's more marketing than it is gifting.
Right.
Which, again, there's room for that stuff. There's we built an entire, software suite for this, for all of our ABM customers. So, account-based marketing is that. But your accounts get deep. They stay with you for 10 years, and you have to nurture them, and you have to talk to them. And, and you have to show that you have to show them that every year you want to kind of go out of your way to show them that you care. Right, at least one time, even if the people you want to touch consistently. And then there's customers that you want to acquire. Right, there's people that takes 2, 3, 4 years before they become your customers. So these are leads that you have relationships with, but maybe they don't buy yet from you, but you want to. I mean, you have to nurture them as well. It's the same deal. But you're basically saying the same thing. I'm gifting to you because I like you, and I want you to be. It's not like a secret. I want you to become my customer. That's why I'm gifting. But I want you to see that the thing I offer, I see value in what I do for you. It's important, because without that, it's just a bribe. It's just like, no. Here, if you take this from me, you now have to buy from me. It's not like that at all.
10% off the top for you personally, kind of thing. It's like, no, man, that's not the relationship.
That is not the relationship. Correct. Right. We can't do that. So GildedBox is born basically out of the premise that that gifting in the corporate world really sucks. And what we figured out is that gifting generally means, when people say gifting, when our customers say gifting, they really mean customer. And when they say swag, they mean employee. A lot of times that's, those businesses are typically flipped. So when somebody buys, because there's something, swag has some space in the corporate gifting world on the customer facing side, but it's rare. Swag generally means, things in boxes for employees. And that's, water bottles, t-shirts, hats, things like that. And again, if you're giving me a t-shirt with your logos on it, and you're giving me a Patagonia vest, all that stuff's nice. It's just, it's just not a gift. It's I'll put it this way, it's probably a uniform.
Yeah, and so you're servicing both sides of that. You're servicing the people that do the swag, and then you're servicing people that do the gifting, or what's the?
No. I'm saying we service the employee side of the business too. There are scenarios where our customers want to gift to their employees and not make them wear uniforms. It's on average though, if you think about it, if you look at it, right, when people say swag, they generally mean employee. Right. When they say gift, they generally mean customer. But there are scenarios where both are appropriate.
I see. So I imagine the relationship starts out with them looking for gifts for customers, and then they see the things you produce and they love it, and they're like, what else do you guys do? And then they end up with swag at some point, potentially.
Well, we still don't produce anything like swag. What they end up buying from us is
like Yeti cups, things like that.
Yeah, but they need them to look and feel like gifts, right?
Hmm.
There's ways to, there's ways to make, like again, if you buy cups at Tiffany, or at glassware from Baccarat, for your house, that's not swag. Those are gifts. Or if you buy for somebody's
Yeah,
housewarming, right? Those are gifts. But if you get them like, it's that's some promo shop, that's swag. There's a lot that goes into it, right? The product itself isn't all of it. There's more that goes into it essentially,
for sure. It's funny how
right?
both of those two entities put their logos on all of their products, and it's still
Yeah, but
valuable.
they
And it's
but
still
they
valuable.
but because they mean very different things, right? So it just
Right.
comes down to the interpretation of the user, which is exactly again, this is exactly what GildedBox tries to solve for. We try to solve for the gift in the gifting problem, right? Where essentially we understand that gifting is an emotional problem, not a physical one. It's not a question of what, it's a question of how.
Hmm.
It's not a question of what to gift, it's a question of how, right? It's always a question of, you know, what's the moment? How do we create the moment, right? And how the moment is a how. It's not a what. And then the what's in the box is very secondary. And we figured this out very quickly. Um, it only took a couple of years. But if you look at all the feedback that our customers get from their recipients, because they
Hmm.
provide it all for us, right? We see it. Um, they never mention when their recipients start thinking about, hey, we love this, thank you for the gift, all that stuff. They never mention what's in the box. No one talks about
Hmm.
what's in the box. It got to a point where like we shared that internally. We're like, hey, here's a Slack channel, with like, and everybody wants to brag and talk about their customers, like how much they love what we do. It got to a point where like the production manager came back. He's like, hey, can you guys start posting pictures of the thing they're talking about? He's like, I have no idea what we made for these people, why they're
Hmm.
so happy.
They're talking about an
And
act of gifting and not the
correct.
product itself.
But it's not like I want like everyone. Like I'm yet to find a single like email that came back from a client where like they said, "Hey, look at how much my customer loved," and said, "Thank you for the wine," or
Yeah,
thank you for the cheese board," or whatever it was. No one actually mentions the thing they got.
it's actually an interesting point because in order for somebody to provide feedback on the act and not mention the product, that means that the product itself has to be like so right that it becomes natural, because otherwise it'd be visible. It's almost like shitty customer service is visible, but good customer service goes unnoticed.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's just like that, right? So like it's like if you think about sports, right? If you have to talk
Yeah,
about if you talk about refereeing, it's bad. No one ever talks about how good the refereeing is at a game.
absolutely. Because it's
You
like,
know,
it's just normal. It's like everybody expects things to be like, nobody basically talks how happy they are about the fact that they have electricity or internet. It's only a problem when it disappears.
Yeah, so in the gifting world, that's exactly I think so we call it table stakes. So in the gifting world, for something to be a good gift, we really discovered that we've sent hundreds of thousands of gifts at this point. We've really discovered that like if you take all the gifts sort of like and break it down, and really like a good gift is broken down really only into two things. It only has to be two things. It has to be desirable and relevant, right? Now those are somewhat bucketed terms. You have to unpack it a bit. But like a desirable gift is actually somewhat easy. It's desirable meaning that like you open it and like you want it, right? It has to be desired by pretty much other people as well, right? So
Hmm.
if you open the box, basically it can't be when you open you go, what is it? Right?
Right. Or
Imagine a
it's
gift
like, oh,
somebody
it's
looks and goes,
nice, but I'm going to put it in a drawer and not use it.
but generally, like imagine take it to its extreme, right? Whatever it could be, right? There's like think of a thing you'd never buy yourself, right? But you'd still be happy to get, right? There's lots of stuff like that. Um, and there's, I don't know, trying to think of what that item might be. But the idea is that like, like a good example is like a paperweight, right?
Hmm.
Well, like people don't really, that used to be really fun, like or a popular gift for like office people, right? But generally speaking, a pretty useless thing, especially to today's world, right?
But a nice
But like,
paperweight actually makes sense. It's a good gift.
well, but this is the point, right? The problem is what is nice, right? Desirable meaning if I open it, I'm like it's a Louis Vuitton paperweight, right? It's
That's
no
cool.
longer really a paperweight. I know that's my point. So you put it on your desk. It's really a sculpture. What you've given me is art. Like
Right.
you have, I mean, you can call it whatever you want. You can keep my paper down. It can just sit on my desk. What you've given me is art, right? You just got to know that like I love Louis Vuitton or I love something that's like high end, whatever. I'm a brand person, right?
Bougie.
But the idea, sure. But the idea is that like it's now it's not long it's no longer that thing that it pertains to be, right? It's not like it's not a it long doesn't serve the function of like holding paper down. There's not a lot of wind in my office, right?
Right.
The idea is that it sits and it works as an art piece, right? And then but the desirability comes from that. If you open and says, wow, it's Louis Vuitton, you almost don't care what it is. It could be a paperweight, it could be a pair of scissors. It just
Fucked
doesn't
up,
matter,
man. It's
right?
fucked up.
But it's true.
I know it's true. It's true. It's just
That's the point. But that's
yeah.
exactly how it works. You're excited to get it to come in beautiful packaging. The act of receiving it is going to be memorable. And like they're Louis Vuitton scissors, and you're gonna display them, and you're gonna tell people about them. It's a Louis Vuitton paperweight in your desk. Everybody walks into your office is gonna see that thing first, and they're gonna ask you about it. You're gonna tell them a story how your friend gave it to you, or
they're
how a
cool.
customer gave it to you.
Right.
Yeah. It's exactly that. Right. But also it has to be relevant. That's the relevant. We just touched on the relevancy part as well. So that's the desirable part. The relevancy part is just to be relevant to the person receiving it. So like you have to know that I love Louis Vuitton, or you have to know that or it has to be personal to me somehow, right? To basically take care. So you have to know that, let's say, I appreciate art sculptures. So you'd give me one of those things, right? So like, yes, it's a paperweight, but we know that Russell will see it as a work of art.
All
I mean,
right.
to some degree, again, I to take it to its ridiculous extreme, Louis Vuitton scissors, right, could also be interpreted that way, right? Because it's basically
Right.
kind of a play on the brand, and basically saying, look, whatever I slap my branding on, as long as they're like exceptional scissors, that has to be that. You have to hold it, and something has to be different about those scissors.
The
Like
weight.
anything you can put. Sure, all of it.
Right.
I'm sure they're going to come with a display stand as well. That's the other part, right? They're not meant to be used as scissors. They're just meant to be displayed as scissors. That's
Right.
kind of the point. That's kind
Right.
of the point. So the relevancy part is the other part, right? So it has to be relevant to you. The way so we figured that here. So we said no matter what the brand has to be recognizable in the box. So when you open something, you have to go, ooh, okay, I know what this is, right? I'm an audiophile and I know what Bang & Olufsen is, right? So I open and go, wow, this is great. But but let's say you give this to somebody who doesn't understand the first thing about audio, right? There's not an audiophile. They don't care actually. They'd open that and they'd prefer a different brand. That maybe Sony would be more valuable to them because it's more recognizable to them. You just have to know your audience. And that's usually, we teach our customers to understand the difference, right? So you have to know your audience so you can give to them properly, right? But the idea is that you are able to take, the 30 proverbial audiophiles and be able to give them, 30 Bang Olufsen headphones. And then they'll take another group of people and then be able to give them, 30 Sony headphones and know which ones are which. That's important, right? So to them, right, and it's going to make the same impact means that across the entire your spectrum of customers or your spectrum of recipients, which means that like the audiophiles are going to get the thing they love, and the people that don't care about the brand as much because they don't know what it is, but see that it's a brand they recognize and its headphones are going to use on an airplane whenever they travel, something in their everyday life, and it's super comfortable. They're going to really appreciate that too.
Yeah.
They'll know that.
Yeah. And so how do you create a sales process around it? Because as I'm listening to it, it just sounds like a different curate. It sounds like a difficult curation process because a lot of these customers who are coming to you, some of them know what their customers would like, but there's a lot of discovery, right? In the sales process between your salespeople and the people that are buying the gifts.
Oh, absolutely. So discovery is actually a really important part here, right? So my favorite, I love sales in general because it gives me a great lens on this stuff. Because ultimately, gifting is good. Gifting is just a great sales enabler, and and we always you want to diagnose the problem always before you want to diagnose the customer really well and diagnose his recipients before you provide anything because otherwise it's going to look like you're trying to sell them something that you try to say anything to get them to buy, which is not the goal here. You don't want that actually. Right, and my favorite approximation to sales is medicine. Actually, I like that the most because well, in medicine, right? So diagnosis or treatment without diagnosis, it's called malpractice. Like you get sued for that and put in jail. Actually, right? So well, imagine walking into into an office and you're like, "Hey, doctor, my arm hurts," and he looks at you, and goes, "Okay, well, how about surgery next Tuesday?" See you then. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
Right? But we do that in sales all the time. I know that's extreme. It sounds a bit ridiculous, but we do this in sales all the time. Like you'd never trust a guy after that, right? But the idea is that once he diagnoses the problem and he tells you, I think I know what's wrong, and then he prescribes a treatment, you trust him better than your own opinion.
For sure, because he's wearing a lab coat. Absolutely.
Well, there's more to it than, I mean,
I know.
hopefully hopefully more convincing you than just his lab code.
Yeah, a
But
couple of
I think we
reviews,
understand.
a couple of Google reviews in the lab code, bro.
Well, I guess if that's the case, you can just walk into his office and
Yeah, I
go, "When
know.
do I need surgery?" Right?
Yeah, if you're a surgeon, every problem looks like a herniated disc.
Yeah, it shouldn't if you don't. At the very least, you're supposed to ask,
I
"Why
know,
does it
I know.
hurt?"
I'm being funny.
But the idea is that, in sales, right? It's there's such a thing as sales malpractice, which is like you have to design a sales process. You have to do, discovery, which our business is heavily focused on discovery. We basically can't gift properly if you don't have good discovery around the customer. So you have to
Hmm.
understand him and his recipient. You're trying to understand two personas. You're trying to understand the buyer, but really who you're trying to understand for is what's his motivation and the people he's trying to gift to and why they're important to him.
Hmm.
Right? Why are these people the people that he wants to impress, and what could, because that's going to help us recommend the right things to give him that'll make real impact. We want to make a real impact. At the end of the day, we don't win if we don't make an impact for the client. We want to show them that when you gift well, um, that impact is unmatched by pretty much anything else you can do.
Yeah, it's almost priceless.
Yeah, no, it's because it's really hard to, um, and again, it's really hard to measure as far as like, again, gifting doesn't have a ROI, like a traditional ROI in the sense where like you can say, well, if I gift to this guy, he's going to buy 30% more from me. Because it's nonsense. It's the same thing in your personal life, right? If you tell your wife, hey, I gave you Tiffany this holiday season, does that mean you love me 30% more now?
Right.
Well, that's also a ridiculous statement, right? So that's
Yeah.
not the case.
You're with the wrong wife if
So
that's the case.
absolutely right. Absolutely right. It also tells you something. That's true. But I'm saying it's just not like that. Now, even if you are with the wrong person, she's not going to admit it directly. It's just
Right.
never going to be the thing, right? So it's never like that. The ROI here is this. The ROI here is that you have an actual personal relationship with this customer when they feel like they actually know you as a person, not just the services you provide, and they feel like they have a personal relationship with you. So you're much harder to like quit, and you're much easier to solve problems with. Meaning that like every business will have a hiccup, a screw up, whatever, something will happen. And I don't know if they'll buy more from you or not. Usually they will because they trust you more whenever the need comes up. But what it does guarantee is that they'll pick up the phone. Like whenever you want to call them, they'll just talk to you. Like you want to learn something about your own business with them. Like, hey, why do you use me so much? They'll tell you. Or you'll call
Hmm.
them and go, hey, why you only use me one time this year? They'll
Yeah.
tell you.
Yeah.
Like it guarantees that you have a very deep relationship that will allow you to just absolutely make more money in your own business with your other customers. And that is
Yeah.
super valuable. That is more valuable than actually anything else, I think.
I would absolutely agree because it creates a level of trust that whenever there's a problem or a question that comes up, they know that you're on their side, not your personal side.
It
That's
just
a big
makes
deal in every relationship.
correct. It just you just know that like think about how you treat you deal with your friends when you tell them like personal problems you face. You're trading some certainty of like saying, hey, I don't know if this person's going to judge me, but I'm trusting they won't because they're my friend, right?
Right.
For the fact that they'll actually be able to provide some useful advice. So you open up, you become more vulnerable in that sense, but you get something back from them, which is like if
Right.
they're not the asshole, right, they will actually like help you and they will actually say, hey, this is what you should do or this is what you should not do, right? This is what how I see it, right? And then they'll be basically, they will be on it. They will be looking out for your best interest, not just
Taking advantage.
not just taking advantage and then immediately like going, hey, check out, gossiping about it or whatever. Again,
Right. Right.
I don't know what people would do in that scenario because I don't have many of those situations with that.
Right.
But the idea is the same here with your customer. Your customer is to trust you enough where like if there's a problem with an order or a service that you receive from you, he can just tell you. And he can say, hey, I can trust you to fix it, right? I can trust you to like get better at it. Or I want you as a company to get better. So here's what you should do. Like all these things are super valuable. Like they're guaranteed. Like I said, they guarantee that they're going to pick up the phone. And I think that's. And by the way, when there's more business to be had, you're always the first one to go after, right? That
Right.
they're going to go after. And I think that's essentially what you want. It guarantees a very deep relationship that like it's really hard to measure its value over a long period of time because how do you measure the value of a customer that's been with you for let's say 20 years if you didn't do something, right? Because you can't test a negative. So
Right.
like you don't know if they would have only been with you for 5 if you didn't do it. So it's really hard to tell. All right. All I can tell you is that if you do this, they will work just like your personal life does. You'll be thought of as thoughtful and someone who really cares, and the people that care are always the people that stay.
Yeah. It's interesting because it almost seems like there's some degree of uphill battle here because you have to ultimately convince people that that's the case because not everybody thinks in those terms. And so, from a marketing perspective of the Gilded Box, how do you build that level of understanding so that people start understanding the value of gifting?
Well, it starts by, first of all, it starts with us just showing what we've done in the past, right? We say, look, you don't have to take our word for it, but you can take the word of all of our customers, right? After sending so many of these things and after like working with so many customers, I just have enough data on pretty much, we've sent gifts across every industry at this point, so we have enough feedback across pretty much every industry as well. So I know what our best industries on, I know where the ones that like don't benefit as much, right? The ones that, for example, that benefit less are, I got this little slide behind me and it's actually shining right in my neck. Can I move?
Turn to your right. There you go.
Yeah, there you go. So,
no, that's worse.
It is worse. Shit, it's not that good. Hold on. Let me try to do it like that. I'm trying to move. Let's do it like this. Is this better?
Good enough.
Oh man, this is nice. This is much better. It's not burning my neck. Yeah. So one of the things that we basically discovered is, as you look at all of your, and again across every industry, right? You can see where the people benefit the most from this, and it's usually service. So 78% of all businesses are service-based businesses; they're not physical products. And where we see the most benefit, sort of at least the most value being provided, is businesses where it has to be a service-based business, where the average transactional value is somewhat high, where like where the relationships are really worth it, basically is what that means, right?
Financial advisors, consulting firms.
So private equity, banks, private equity, banks, financial advisors, those guys are regulated by FINRA, but even those guys, absolutely, yes. A lot of consulting, construction actually is a big one because, but these are the people that can't be approximated. Like when someone says Nike, what do you think of, right? You think of a shoe. You think of like, I think of a knit upper and then a rubber sole, right? When someone says Apple, the first thing I think of is a cell phone, right? Or an iPod, or iPhone, I guess. There's no more iPod. But like, or AirPods, we'll say, right? But the idea is that like I think of a physical thing. I can, my body and my mind can immediately react to it because I know like Apple feels sleek, it's smooth, the plastic is polished. Like I can almost like my mind remembers what it feels like in my hand.
The texture of the glass, the way the box slides out, things like that.
When I say Deloitte, what do you think?
I don't know. People in suits.
Dudes in suits, absolutely. You just think it's guys in suits, right? But Deloitte doesn't want that image. They want to feel like, first of all, you're not able to touch any of the other senses, right? You don't know what they smell, feel, and then taste like, essentially, So you don't have any other senses that are associated with that company. So, and all of those companies want to have like some representation that allows you to basically go, no, this is Deloitte. This is this thing that like I can hold, touch, experience. Because like otherwise, there's no way for you to think anything of them until you've had like if you've never heard, if you've heard of it but you've never dealt with them, like you don't know what it means. You have no idea, right? So they need to try to convey that before they deal with you, not after, right? And that becomes actually very hard if you're not a physical products company, So the value is real to some degree if you think about it, right? So like if you're a brand new candle company, the problem you try to solve for, for them with higher end packaging is exactly that. Like, why do this? Why would that company want higher end packaging? Because why would they want packaging in general? Why can't they just put it in a paper bag?
Yeah, shelf presence, breaking into a market. There's a variety of things.
Yeah, but that's essentially the same problem here, right? So the idea is that like, why would Deloitte not want to show up in a paper bag, basically?
Yeah, it's basically it's sort of packaging for the service industry to some degree.
Yeah. Well, you're really packaging, but you're packaging the company, not the products inside are just a proxy for what they are, right? They're a proxy for the company. The entire experience should be a proxy for what the company is. You're trying to approximate what it's like to deal with Deloitte before you deal with Deloitte. That's kind of the whole point. So when you give, when they give a gift, and when we make those, we're fully aware of this, and this is really important. So we know that our customers are trying to approximate these things. Right, so we know that like when their recipient gets this box, when they start opening this box, they should feel like this is what it's like to then deal with Deloitte when I actually deal with them, and it should be just impeccable,
relevant, and personal.
Every detail should feel it should feel basically like you haven't forgotten it. Every detail should be visible, and it should look like no detail was left untouched, and that's important because that's exactly how I want to be treated when I deal with a multi-million-dollar consulting firm.
How
because
do
you
you
feel like it's worth the money.
Yeah, how do you consistently create that level of quality and experience when you're producing the products? Because a lot of it is obviously semi-automatic machine assembly. Then there's like human assembly. How do you communicate these values of high quality expectation that you have to deliver on these things that are almost like touchable to the staff that's producing it in the warehouse? Because there's a lot of culture that's tied into it, because in order for you to create that experience over and over again, on the customer side, you have to make sure that the people that work for you kind of understand that level.
Yeah, so starts with everyone understanding what our mission and purpose is, right? So when you start explaining it this way, right? So we spend a lot of time training our managers and the people that sort of run every part of the company, and then their job is to then bring the exact same message down to their people,
Mm-hmm.
and then explain what that means and act like to break that philosophy down into actionable items. This is probably the most things that people miss, but when they don't understand how culture how let's say the goal or the mission
The
breaks down
purpose, the
into like,
mission, right?
yeah, the purpose and the mission of the company breaks into physical actions you can actually do, right? So that is the bridge we always try to cut across here every time we have these discussions. It's not like, hey, let me talk about the philosophy of the business and like why we exist, and we do that a lot already. But
Mm-hmm.
every one of those conversations, like basically the rule is you're not allowed to have that conversation without them tying into specific actions that each person can do. Like, what
Mm-hmm.
does it mean to create a special experience for the customer, right? Everyone talks about that. What does it mean in our case, right? What does it mean here? What does it mean? So we have to show it. We have to explain. Like, well, it means in this case, like if you let's break this box down, right? So you'll take a gift and you open it, start looking at it from the way the box is made to what's in the box, right? All of those choices are explained, and the everyone down to the assembly people understand what that means, like why those choices are made and how they influence um, how those choices influence ultimately the goal and the mission of the company.
Mm-hmm. You're
Um,
essentially you're tying the abstract to the physical, essentially.
yeah, so we're telling you how you're going to how you're going to then take this mission, which is what we're saying, why we exist, and like because we want the customers to love it. At the end of the day, the whole point of gifting is to have a real impact, right? I can like I'm supposed to send if I send 100 boxes out, we send 100 gifts out for our clients. Every gift that gets, you want 100 people to call that client and go, Joe, you shouldn't have. That was
Mm-hmm.
incredible.
Mm-hmm.
That's you should definitely not have spent this much time on me. That's too much, right? Not dollars, time. I really wanted to make sure that the effort is visible, right? So it
Mm-hmm.
looks like a lot of effort went into it. And when we do that, we know we've done our job. Um, our goal though is like, okay, how do you get there? So management's job isn't just to like spew that out and then hope that the people can kind of achieve that. We break it into then actionable. Sort of we create SOP, standard operating procedures out of them, and then we
Mm-hmm.
show how those SOPs tie back to that goal. Essentially, like, yeah, this SOP exists because, and here are the steps you're going to need to take to achieve this goal and the type of experience for the customer. So this is why the box is made a certain way. This is why it's got the corners are rounded or edged a specific way. This is why we want the assembly to happen in these steps and not these other steps.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is why we want to make sure that like you test like when you print something and when we create a specific graphic or a design, we have design standards for it because we know it looks good. So we actually we create a design methodology. So designers follow specific design, like a luxury design methodology. So we make sure that every brand that comes through our door, we follow design principles that like the biggest guys in the world follow. So again, the Louis Vuittons, the Tiffany's of the world, those guys follow specific design principles where like less is more, but like the
Right.
materials are
White
with the
space
material.
and right
Yeah, so
texture, right.
we have all that in all of our SOPs for the designers. So the idea is that at the end of the day, we can take any brand that a company comes with, right? Any company, and make them look and feel premium by the time their recipients touch it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's great because I think in a manufacturing environment, it's very difficult to have those conversations because if you start thinking larger scale, you got these like large Fortune 1,000 companies that manufacture sort of even consumer packaged goods or even high quality. It's like I don't know if the employees at the factory level can understand the culture that happens at the higher levels that the management want to sort of propagate throughout. You have like 500 employees in the warehouse, and the guy driving the forklift has to understand that placing the pallet in a certain way in a certain space has a complete impact on how the consumer on the shelf looks at a product.
Absolutely, and that's yeah. So this is where I guess. So first of all, there's no substitutes for consistency. So
Yeah.
meaning that you have to consistently hammer the message home. You're on schedule, and you're always basically having these meetings and you're talking about it, right? And then you're making sure that your managers and their team leads and then the pod leaders are always talking about it with their people, and they understand it, right? So then every metric. This is the other thing. Everyone should know whatever their job is. They have let's say 2 to 3 KPIs that are like key for them always, right? These are the ones we look for, no matter who you are, no matter which position you work. You have, let's say, 3 metrics that like are reported and your ability to perform. And those metrics are what ties into I can take directly each one of those metrics and tie it to the goal. I can say this metric exists because here's what it does to deliver on the goal that the company has.
Yeah.
And meaning that not revenue goal, I'm talking about the goal of being,
Purpose and value, right?
Of being impactful for the customer, correct?
Right. How long did it
So
take to put together? It's like, that's a huge job, man. It literally took
years.
Yeah.
The answer is years. The answer is years. It takes years to understand, and then and the other thing is, it actually never ends. So it doesn't take a long. There's no way to put it together. Just the culture gets created and then maintained, right? It's one of those things. It's a question of it's almost like asking somebody how long does it take to get in shape, right? The answer is
indefinitely.
It's like
every day.
It's indefinite because being in shape isn't a destination. It's daily actions. It's how you live, right? That's what you do, right? It's like, this is why I don't like the word diet, because diets imply that it ends at some point. It's a lifestyle. It's just like you either live healthy or you don't, right? You either choose every time you pay attention to what's in the box, or you don't, or on your box of Wheaties, or you don't. Like these are the choices you make. It's a whole sum of choices that you make that usually then takes years to realize. And this is the other thing is, right, it's actually very similar to like going to the gym. Like you go to the gym one day, you work out really hard, you see no results.
Yeah.
Right. You go the second day, you work out really hard, you still see no results, right? It may take you 100 days before you start seeing anything,
right?
And it's so you have to keep taking those actions, although there's like absolutely nothing keeps changing. And it's really, so to the question of how long does it take? It takes forever. The answer is that it takes always. And it takes always and forever, and you can't stop. But the minute you realize that you've taken your first step,
right? It's ultimately a lifestyle. You basically have to start treating the business as part of the lifestyle, because it's like, that was actually the hardest thing that I remember, when I was running the paper tube company. It was very difficult to separate the personal from the business, because the business is essentially the personal. Because in order for you to do well in the business and create the values and the purpose and make sure everybody lives them on an ongoing disciplined basis, you have to live those things on a personal disciplined basis yourself. And so at a certain point, that line between the business and the personal tends to blend, and it was actually one of the hardest thing I had to kind of deal with, because like at a certain point, you just find yourself doing nothing but working. And I like working. I just like, there has to be sort of a, people say you got to create a balance, right? The balance between your personal life and your business. And it's like, it's very hard to do.
So I was going to say, please don't say work-life balance. I find that concept.
I know it's bullshit, in my opinion.
I find it complete and utter nonsense. There is no such thing as work-life balance. It's bullshit. You can't do it. Like, so especially if you're running a business, maybe that exists. But here's the thing: I don't even think that can really exist in even if you don't run a business, right? The real question is, if you don't care about what you do, let's say you work for a company somewhere, right? Like, do doctors have work-life balances, right? So ultimately, if you care about the patient's outcome, what are you going to do? If you're like, okay, look, I have somebody, you're on call 24/7, whether you like it or not. If you have a patient in your practice and they're having an event, whatever that event is, and they're in the hospital, they're dying, and it's Saturday night, and you're out, you're not gonna yes, there's people that cover for you, but at the end of the day, that's gonna get to you, and you have to go deal with it.
Yeah, if you're not on board with that, you're in the wrong career field, to be honest. But then sure. I think you can take that to every career. It's kind of like,
That's my point. That's my point. I think the idea is complete nonsense. So I think, but especially when it comes to like building a business, building a company, like there is no such thing as work-life balance. It's nonsense. Like I don't have any. There is no like. I'm just always. I'm always living and working, and I have my personal life tied into it as well. And I have my and but all of it works kind of together. I don't. I just it's just one life. I can't really say it doesn't really separate. I don't separate these things. I think
Yeah,
it's together.
it's a soup.
I find
It's
the
not.
complete.
It's not right.
I find it complete nonsense. Yeah, it's a soup, right? It's not. They're not like they're not. It's all. And you take any of those things out, it's no longer a good soup.
Right. And then if soup's not your thing, then pray for winning the lottery.
Sure, sure. But even then, I mean, even with
Yeah.
that's going to be hard because you won't know what to do with it.
Yeah. How do you
I
not?
just think
How
that
do you not burn out? Because if you have no work-life balance and your work is your life and your life is your work and it's all a soup, how do you ensure that you don't run yourself into the ground?
sure, that's an easy one. That's actually a really easy one. So just like I want to make sure I always show up to work. I always want to make sure I show up to, to take care of myself. Um, there's a schedule for it, right? So if you've ever flown, you remember that the first thing the stewardess tells you is, please put on your oxygen mask before putting on the oxygen mask of anyone besides you.
Mm,
Why did they do that? You can't help other people. I can't run my business if I haven't slept enough, if I haven't, if I can't make good decisions, if I'm not eating healthy, if I'm not working out. So like, okay, I know that like at 5:30 or in the morning every day, I go to the gym. That's just what I do. So I build my day around that. But I know like whatever time I find the time and I say, okay, I don't schedule any, meetings or whatever it is. That's why I do it at 5:30 in the morning and not later. But the point is like, that's my time. And I go and do that because that helps me, that enables me to do the rest of my stuff. Right? It's just it's basically a non-negotiable. You just go and do
mm,
it. So no, and there's exactly like when it's time to sleep, when it's time to stop working, when it's time to stop doing so. And then look, everything is, you know, like in business, you think about this is the thing, right? So you probably figured this out also as you were doing this. Um, the most exciting thing about when you see some success, it's also the most dangerous one, which is like
right.
all of a sudden the first time you see some success in what you're doing, everything starts seeming like an opportunity to you. Immediately, everything looks like the next opportunity. You're like, oh my God, I can do so much more with this. And there's all this
Right.
other stuff that comes at you. And that is the problem, right? Because you start thinking that you can do all of these things, right? And the problem with any of it is like, or all of it, I should say, is that you have to learn how to basically look at this and go, okay, what do I do? Ruthless prioritization. What do I do first, right?
Mm,
It's like, taken to its extreme, it's unlimited resources with unlimited opportunities. But business isn't like that, right? Business is limited resources with unlimited opportunities.
mm-hmm.
You have you no matter who you are. If you're Microsoft, you have limited resources,
Right.
right? If you're GildedBox, you also have limited resources. If you're PaperTube, you have limited resources. I love when people go, "We're a small company, we have limited resources." Every fucking company has limited resources. There are no unlimited companies with unlimited resources. They do not exist, right? But taken to its extreme, every
Casinos.
company, no, those people also have limited resources. My point is that take it to its extreme, the opportunity is unlimited. You can
Mm,
fundamentally, you can have a business that sells all things to all people. You can have a business that flies customers around the world and sells them toothpaste. Like you do all of it, right? American Airlines toothpaste, American Airlines, the
yeah, it's
airline.
hard to do.
Well, no, it's impossible, right? And
Right.
that's kind of why we have all of these other right? Because then like, but I'm saying that like everything's an opportunity. Everything's an opportunity. So the way you do this is, then we've built some sort of some discipline. We'll say some discipline around that, just to be able to understand that what actual opportunities need to be pursued,
Mm-hmm.
and then what things aren't really opportunities and actually need to be pursued even more aggressively, right? So we
Mm,
actually divide. We actually look at our problems here. We we look at the next thing to do here. We divide whatever the next action is. We try to first decide these. We put these actions into two buckets. We decide if it's an opportunity or a problem.
mm-hmm.
That's how we decide to do that. Basically how I stay sane, right? So one of the biggest lessons I've learned is if you scale too quickly, you just end up scaling your problems.
Interesting.
If you grow too fast and you don't fix your problems, you just grow the problems.
Right.
And at some point, the problems become so big that you can't grow anymore, and you have to undo all the stuff. You have to basically slow down first. You gotta you gotta sell less. You gotta like here, simple example. You have an untrained sales staff. Tell me if you've seen this before at CustomUSB, right? You have an untrained sales staff and lots of leads coming in.
Yeah, it's
right?
great, but it's a curse.
Great. So what do we do instead of trying to? So the dollars that you have immediately, the first reaction is great. I'm going to get more leads. I'm going to keep pumping these leads and hire more salespeople. But if you don't have a good environment, meaning that like a good environment where you can insert new salespeople into. What do I mean by good environment? You have good management. You can actually identify and hire and recruit new people that follow like a specific like set of
Process,
rules that
systems,
you've set.
yeah.
Well, that follow a specific set of rules that you've set of like what makes a good salesperson at your company.
Mm-hmm.
And then like you have systems in place that make the person successful. And then you have a way to manage that person to make sure that they can, they can deliver on whatever KPIs you've decided.
You track them. Somebody's tracking them, right?
Yeah. Like how do you know if they're going to be good in 6 months, right? You should be able to look 90 days from now and say, hey, this person's great or this person shouldn't be here, right? You should be able to do that. Like if you don't have any of these systems, right? So you take those dollars, instead of using them to build up your systems, you use them to get more advertising, just advertise more and get more leads in, right? And just throw bodies at the problem. At some point, you will just spend more dollars in ad. Like this keeps growing. It's like headwinds, right? At some point, the amount of force you're putting out is equivalent of the amount of force that's being pushed back at you. It's like, it works like a drag coefficient on your car. All right. So basically you will need to spend, at some point you will need infinity. It's what's called, it's an asymptotical limit. You can get infinitely close, but you will never get more dollars, which is basically you will need infinitely more dollars to get like the next cent through the door.
Mm-hmm.
You will need to spend, there'll be a point where you need to spend $10,000 in advertising to get, $100 more in revenue.
Yeah, it makes no sense. Absolutely.
Correct. It's one of those, like, it's a horsepower problem with cars, right? At some point, like, you can go 100 miles an hour pretty much, in a 100 horsepower car, but like to go to 200 miles an hour, you now need like 1,000 horsepower car. It's not 200, it's not 1-to-1, right? But to go 300 miles an hour, it's no longer, you don't need 2,000 horsepower. You now need like, way more. And the design of the car has to be different.
Yeah, and you need roads.
Yeah, the design of the car is completely different.
Right.
And like because aerodynamics won't allow you to. The point is, like, it doesn't matter how much power I give you at some point. If you have a brick, you're trying to fly, at 300 miles an hour, it won't fly. It just won't happen.
The laws of physics kick in.
It's the same thing here, but it's exactly the same thing here. So if you this is the scaling when you don't solve your problem, right? So at some point you just and then how do you undo it? Now you have to fix. Now imagine this happens, and now you have a team of 20 people that are functioning in a dysfunctional environment. You're just throwing money at advertising. You're now converting at a much lower rate. Your people probably suck. Everyone's disgruntled because they can't convert shit, right?
Yeah.
And you're now spending twice as much on advertising. You've now hired way more people to like try to produce the product, right? So now you have upset customers, low quality product, because now you have to like maintain the revenue just to maintain the headcount, right? And now you're trying to solve all this. Now you're saying, okay, now we got to solve the sales problem. So now it's a lot harder to solve because you have all these 20 people you got to train. It's much harder to solve this because now you got 20 people to train as opposed to 5. Right?
It's just going to cost you way more money, absolutely, and more time.
Which you're already spending. You end up being between a rock and a hard place. Right? I've done this before. I just know because I've done this before. This is exactly what we've done. We try to scale before fixing the problems. So when we decide what to do, we decide, is this an opportunity or a problem? And we always want to fix problems before we pursue opportunities. Right? Problems are things that existentially like threaten your business. Problems are things that basically, like, if you have a high churn rate, it's a problem. If your customers leave because your product's not good enough, that's a problem you got to fix. There's too many complaints. Customers go, hey, your problem, this sucks. Like, you have too much of that. Like, it's a problem. You got to go fix it. Like, fix the product before you advertise more and get more customers, right? If your customers go, like I said, your salespeople are converting enough leads. Their conversion rate sucks. Like, don't hire more salespeople. Fix that first. Get a script in place. Do more training, and then when you have that environment in, guess what? Now onboarding and hiring new people becomes easier because you can bring them in. You can grow to 20 people really quickly if the first 5 that but to get the first 5 operational to the level that you need, that will take, may take a year. It just will take.
Yeah, it's not rocket science. It's brain surgery, as they say.
Yeah. It's not even. It's. This is the thing. It's incredibly simple, but incredibly difficult. All right. Simple isn't, simple doesn't mean easy. Simple just means it's simple to do. It's just difficult to pull off. It's simple to write out. I can tell you all the steps. It's just, it's doing it daily, and then putting all the boring work in. Practicing the script for the 40th time is no fun. I can tell you that right now. Testing a landing page for the 97th time is no fun.
Right.
It just isn't, because like you've done it. You want to move on to something else. But you've done it. You want to move on to something else, something more exciting, something that gets your blood boiling, new curations, cool new ideas, new marketing, things like that. And generally speaking, in businesses, people want to work on the thing that they're good at, right? So if you're good at sales, you're going to just work in sales, right? If you're good at if you're good at marketing, you're going to want to do more marketing. Like that's the
Right.
thing you're going to want to do. Like, owners want, typically entrepreneurs want to do that. But
Yeah, it's all vision, 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 vision. New ideas, something cool, new markets,
but
more
those are the
products.
things.
Right.
But that's not the thing that's killing your business. The thing that's killing
Right.
your business is the fact that, like, if you're a marketing guy and you love getting leads and you just keep advertising, getting more leads in, but the fact that your sales team sucks and isn't trained properly and isn't managed well is really the problem. And you need to really work on that.
Yeah, the answer
and
to the
that's
question of what's important. The answer is everything. You have to start analyzing. First of all, you have to start understanding the landscape of every point of your operations and start measuring and analyzing each of those. It's kind of like, I think of it in terms of in a larger company or in any size companies, like everybody's in sales because they say first impression matters, but you don't know when the first impression is going to happen. It's going to be the driver that's driving your truck on the road, or is it going to be the warehouse guy that the trucker's talking to that's delivering the goods, or is it like the salesperson, or is it somebody that meets somebody in like an elevator? And so you have to make sure that like it's every one of those touch points is like stellar.
It's holistic. It's at the end of the day, it's a whole problem. It's not like there's no, like, if you think about what Apple does, that's why Apple works so hard on their boxes, right? Like, why did they make the packaging, so freaking perfect? Why did they spend hundreds of millions of dollars on the box? And,
Right.
like, when they did it, like, people laughed at them. I remember, like, Microsoft laughed at them at the time. They're like, why? Why?
Mm-hmm.
Well, because Steve Jobs at the time understood that that is the first moment of truth. Packaging, the box is the first moment of truth when it comes to the product. It is when the customer makes their impression about what they're about to get. When I touch that box and I open it and it feels a certain way to me, I am immediately making up my mind of what's inside, whether I'm going to love it or not, before I touch that thing. If the packaging is highly impressive and it leaves no question that this company is serious, man, look at what, like, every detail is like, isn't left to chance. It's just whatever I'm going to hold, right? It's got software on, and even if it'll have some issues, I'm going to see those in a different light.
Right.
I'm going to look at those differently. I'm going to look at those as inevitables in a perfect. I'm going to look at them as imperfection or inevitable imperfections in a perfect product,
Yep.
as opposed to a terrible put together product with some bright spots.
Right.
Those are, and they could all be the same thing, just depending on how you like build an impression, right?
Right.
Steve Jobs famously said, "The back of the fence matters just as much as the front of the fence."
Yeah.
You got to paint it.
Yeah,
paint the back of the fence.
It's like a concept of smashable brands. I remember I read a book once that said, if you basically take a sledgehammer to a Ferrari and you find a random piece of a Ferrari, you'll know it came from a Ferrari.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like that with, it's I mean, you could say the same thing about Apple, actually. Apple's like that too. Apple's one of my favorite brands for that reason. They figured that part out, they, like, you can smash an iPhone and you can basically, like, take a piece of glass and pretty much tell you if it came from an iPhone or not.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and everybody, it's not me, it's everybody that can do it. You can just tell.
Yeah, it's a weird psychology that everybody kind of on a under the surface understands, but nobody sort of thinks about it out loud. But everybody understands it, in my opinion. And again, it only matters when it's a problem. When it's not a problem, you just don't even notice it, and it just becomes kind of a norm.
I think the reason people don't think about it is because it's actually somewhat counterintuitive. It's everybody, when it comes to you and me, right? When we basically buy something, when you're approaching, people have a hard time seeing things from other people's point of view, right? When you're approaching a purchase yourself, you're always going to approach it from an emotional perspective. You just never think of it that way, right? But the idea is that, like, how you feel always matters to you. But, like, when you sell that product, you're like,
it's a rational decision.
Yeah. You think everyone else is rational, right? You think everybody else makes these decisions, but it's not how it works, right? People don't really think that way. And human beings we're actually not, like, the faster you realize that human beings are not rational, we're emotional creatures. Every decision is emotional, actually, and it's just underpinned by logic afterwards, right? Typically what will happen is you buy something because for some emotional reason, you love it, for one reason or another. And then you use logic to explain why you're going to buy it.
Yeah.
Right. But you got to love it first. And then the proof is very easy, right? Suppose if I give you, suppose I say you have all the money in the world, you're a billionaire, you can buy whatever you want, right? and you come across the most rare, expensive looking Ferrari or whatever else is out there, say, or car guy, right? And you
Mm-hmm.
see it, and it's like, it ticks all the boxes except for one thing. You look at it and you're like, I think it's ugly. I don't love it.
Mm-hmm.
You're just not, I don't care what you tell me, you're not buying that thing. You're just not. You're like, I don't love it. I don't care. I can use my money on anything. I don't need to make more money. My goal isn't to buy an investment. Like I have stocks and bonds and all of this shit. Why do I need to buy this? I'm just not
Mm-hmm.
going to buy it. You don't love it. You're going to buy something you love. Conversely, let's say you're broke, but there's a $300,000 Ferrari that you drove by. You look at that thing and you're in love. Now your
Mm-hmm.
brain's going, okay, what do I got to do to get me one of those? Right. So now you're starting to build rational actions behind the action, which is like, okay, what do I got to do to get this? Right. So now your brain's functioning properly. And that's actually why we're built that way, because, and not the other way, because if you don't have that action up front, you're not forced to take action to get there. If you
Right.
start the other way, you'll never take any action.
That's right.
If you start from logic, you won't take action, because that scenario of that car driving down the street going, man, what do I got to do to get that? I love that. I don't know why I love it. Just do. I want one of those. Man, it's beautiful. Okay, it's $300,000. How much? Okay. Well, maybe I just won't buy lattes for like a month, or for 5 years,
Fucking
right?
drinking
And then what
expensive
else?
lattes, bro.
Well, no, then what else? Well, that's not enough. What else? Maybe I can downsize my house. Maybe I can, you start thinking about like,
How can I
what other
justify? How
terrible,
can I find a way to buy
what,
it?
uh, what terrible financial decision can I make and still justify the way to still be able to afford this,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's ultimately how you do it. And that's how everybody, because that's the first thing that pops into your mind. It's like, what do I need to do to get that?
Yeah.
And it's exactly how it works.
Yeah, it's interesting because I remember you told me a long time ago that when you were like 15, 16, your dad subscribed the Rob Report to you
Yeah.
specifically. And as you started looking at like the watches and the cars in it, that fueled um, your want to go do something that will allow you to afford those things, to come a full circle.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So the way I started in business was I didn't know that like I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I did. I knew that like there's a whole lifestyle out there. I was a poor immigrant, just like you, man. We came here with nothing. Um, but I knew there was this whole like lifestyle out there that most people didn't have. And like, these things were basically like, accessible to a few. But I knew that like to get it, you have to just do, you have to do more, right? You have to build a business, you have to build some stuff. But like ultimately that became the original goal. It was like, okay, so like what do I have to do it's exactly like what actions do I have to take to afford that Ferrari? It was literally the question, right? Because that was the thing that like said, look, this is the thing that validates, my, especially at the time. Those also was the background here is also important. Remember, as an immigrant, when you come with nothing, you're not used to that stuff. So
Right.
that became even more important because, maybe I looked at Ferrari differently than maybe a typical American would because they would just look at it as, it's just like, a toy for a rich person. I saw it as so much more. I saw it as a status symbol. I saw it as a
Status
way
symbol,
to
right?
like, well, we saw it as a way to like to show that like you can now do something where you couldn't, where we come from, right? You couldn't do any of those things. It was
It's almost a
those
freedom.
things.
It was like the American dream.
Yeah, you couldn't get it. It didn't matter what you did before. Like those things weren't available to you. Like you couldn't dream about it even. You could just look at it in a picture. It's the best you can
Right.
do.
Right.
You know, and that was the difference, right? You looked at it, and then but that was the reason. Like one of my favorite sayings is like doing you know doing the wrong things for the right reasons, right? Is worse than doing the right things for the wrong reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Well, because I'd rather do the wrong thing and still get the right outcome, right? Because that's fucking what I wanted to do.
Yeah, I see.
Um,
I see. That
like I just needed to get started. I just needed to get started.
did it matter
It's and
what?
no, that was the point. It's like that's the other complete nonsense bullshit that's out there. It's like you have to follow your dream. You have to love it. Like I mean, you're gonna naturally gravitate to the thing that you're gonna like that you know. And the thing you know is gonna be the thing that like,
You like?
you gravitated to previously. Yeah. So I got into technology because, I was an engineer in school and before that I loved computers and just like we got into tech and we got into building websites and we got into selling things online. It's just how it happened. And then out of that, you learn how to be, a good entrepreneur, right? Well, you learn to be an entrepreneur, a pretty bad one to start with, and then hopefully a better one and a better one and a better one. And then actually, if you take any of this stuff to its extreme, this is why, again, the idea of like doing what you love is complete nonsense, especially if you're building a business. Um, take it to its extreme. Every business is the same. If you're the top, if you're the CEO, if you're the owner of that business, if you're the CEO specifically, I don't mean the owner. I mean, the equity owner is a bit different. But if you're the CEO, if you're running this business, you're going to have a head of marketing that reports to you, a head of sales, you're going to have a head of manufacturing, you're basically going to have like, and a head of HR, like you're basically going to have the same 5 people report to you, no matter what business you're running, whether you're making, widgets or you're producing podcasts or you're making movies. I don't know. It's all the same. Cars. It's all the same. You as a CEO, you have the same 5 people reporting to you. None of it matters. It just, that day is the same.
So you're looking at it as almost a position of a CEO rather than some business that you're actually running. Is that kind of the way to think about it?
Yeah. So as you take into its extreme, the bigger the business is, right? So like, I mean, it's important that the CEO understands what happens on the production line, right? But like, he's not actually like, he doesn't have to love cars to understand it, is what I'm saying, right? He doesn't have to love, packaging to understand it, like from your perspective, right? He just has to, that's not what that means. He has to love building an organization that can make all those things happen. You have to like, and as you keep going, right? Like, well, let's take it back down to its micro level. When you start out, the first thing you got to do is build the product, or you build the thing you want to sell, right? Let's say you're making, like the paper tube packaging is a great example, right? So you're like, how do I make a perfect tube? What's a good tube? What does that even mean, right? For my customer, what does it mean to basically, is it like you figured out that what a luxury good tube actually looks like? Why does it feel luxury to a client? You figured that out, right? But your job initially is like essentially you're a product engineer to some degree. You're like,
Right.
okay, I'm trying to understand why people love this tube. But as you get bigger, your job is no longer to make a good tube. Your job is now to make the machine that makes the tubes or sells the tubes. It's like, it's no longer the thing that says, okay, now I got to sit here and keep perfecting the tube because that's when we get you more tubes. That's not it anymore. Now I got to build a machine that helps me sell these tubes more, right? So it's no longer like, okay, now I know it's the next level. And after that, there's another level, and then there's another level and another level, right? Until you get to a point where essentially just like you're too far away from it. You're very far away from the tube, but the path is very clear. So you can keep seeing it and make sure that it's always the perfect tube.
Well, then how does that go in line with the culture aspect? Because, in order for you to talk to your employees across all departments in a way that tells them that you, as, the guy in charge, believes in the vision that you're setting.
You still have to understand why customers buy your stuff. I mean, that never goes away.
I mean, does
right?
does the product matter? Like, does what you do matter? Like, do you have to love what you do? Like the love what you do. You just told me it doesn't matter. But on the other hand,
I don't think so. People, so look, no one loves, it's not possible to love what you do, especially love comes from being good at something, but everyone starts out sucking at this stuff. So it's not possible to love what you do right away anyway. So basically, you have to continue to do something. You have to like it enough. Let's put it this way. I wouldn't say love, but you have to like it enough to say, I want to be good at this, despite my discomfort of being shitty at it to begin with.
What you really have,
right?
What you really have to love is building.
Correct. You have to be, at the end of the day, you have to love improving yourself. So I'll tell you this, so like gifting, right? Like why, like I believe I'm, as we're pretty good gifters now. And me personally, I understand a lot about what makes good gifting. But when I started out, I didn't love gifting. That's not what this was about. What I did want to do is I loved the idea of being a really good CEO, being a really good entrepreneur. So I said, okay, what's it going to take to build a really good company that does this, right? So I said, okay, well, that means I'm going to have to understand the gift. So initially we sucked at gifting. We took like a lot of complaints and we took a lot of like, questions, and we try to minimize the complaints by talking to our customers as fast and as early as possible to try to understand, give stuff away for free just to get feedback, right? Understand, do things for free for our customers. So you trade free for feedback. Right?
Yeah,
hey, we'll do this for you. We'll do this for you, but we want to know like how you'd improve it. We want to know actually what you'd like to see from a company like ours, right? So it gave us a chance to really improve and understand, like first, it just didn't improve, understand what it is that we were going to do. And as we started understanding it and as we started building it, when positive feedback starts rolling in, you love it more. Right now, I genuinely love it. Right. I love it because whenever I see a customer that gets so much value out of what we do, and then I see that, and you basically see it now you want to bake it into every product. We consider it a failure when we don't get something like this from every customer.
You get the satisfaction of seeing people appreciate what you deliver.
Yeah. Now, if you ask me, do you love it? Of course I fucking love it. But I'm saying it's not possible to love it to start with. That's not how it works. It was actually pretty miserable because you're like, you can't be good at it when you start,
Constantly
like,
failure.
it's just not how it is. it's constant failure. You gotta love like learning about it. You know, you
Yeah.
gotta love basically just the grind to some degree, or you gotta love the idea of it 10 years down the road.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but you know, it's the same thing. You know, start a business. You know, well, again, when I said do the wrong, you know, do the wrong things for the right reasons, right? You're like, well, I'm going to, I want this Ferrari, right? Great. That's the wrong reasons to do something, or I should say, do the I guess I said it backwards, right? It's doing the right things for the wrong reasons, right? Getting the Ferrari is the wrong reason to start a business, but but doing the right things means starting something in this case, right? So the
Yeah.
idea is that like, no matter what, the right thing to do is to start something. So you're like, look, it doesn't matter, but I want this thing, right? So I started and I start doing all this stuff. And then like, even if it was for the wrong reason, I still end up getting getting an invaluable education and end up building something that at that point goes, great. Now I have a chance to actually be good at it because I've done it for so long.
Right.
And now it becomes fun. But like when you start out, it's like it's a grind. It's always a grind. It's a grind now. I can't tell you, you know. But like you just learn how to like you learn how to deal with it. You learn how to, you know. I mean, there isn't an entrepreneur that will tell you at any level, by the way, whether it's $1 million level, you know, or $1 billion level, that tells you it's easy.
Yeah.
It's always a grind. And by the way, your problems don't go away, but dollars is just multiply.
Correct.
I really believe the frame that like actually your success, I think, is directly correlated to your ability to handle stress. One of the things that I've learned is like the more, you know, the bigger your company will get, the more success, the more threats there's always, and the more like, you know, the more pressure there's going to be on you personally, and the more like just stress that'll come down on you. So your ability, like, I just remember the first time I ever had to deal with like the concept of a lawsuit or any of that stuff, you know, just like that seemed like I couldn't sleep for like weeks, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Now if I get like any of that stuff, I just like, you know, good, great, we have a channel to deal with it, and just, you know, move on. I have, you know, just I get sent it to the lawyer, I go to sleep just fine.
Yeah. I'm
You
gonna go
know,
to my
I
gym
just
in the
move on.
morning anyway, so all good. Just,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, and then you gotta, you know, you keep the most important goal in mind, which is build the company. Keep building, building, and building. Keep looking at the thing, you know, keep sort of the goal front and center. Don't let the side quest, so to speak, distract you, and don't let it derail like your sort of mental capacity to like really move forward. I think that's the biggest threat usually. It's like
Yeah.
the mental capacity to move forward.
Yeah. So to the people that have a hard time starting and they're thinking about starting and they're looking for something they're gonna like, stop thinking and just do. That's the answer.
Yeah, so the real answer is this. Everyone's good at something. Everybody's done something in their life that like they can, you know, every person's unique in that sense, right? You have some unique experiences that you can like leverage into whatever that is. Like if you think about the Gilded Box, the fact that we built custom USB so wrong is actually the thing that helped us build this business so correct. Because now we are targeted at a market. We're only trying to sell the right kind of people. We're not looking for swag customers. We're
You're
not
not
looking for
wasting
promo
money
customers.
or time, right?
We don't. We'll say I wouldn't say we're not. We'll say we just use we
You're
waste
using it
less of it.
smarter than before. Absolutely.
Smarter. Yeah, there's still waste. We're still wasting. We're just wasting less of it now, right? We're getting smarter. I don't think it's an absolute. You can never, you know, perfection can never be attained. However, chasing it is still an admirable goal. Because I know just by trying to chase it, I think what'll happen. It's a Kobe Bryant saying, but just by trying to chase it, I know that like I'm going to outperform 99.9% of the people out there, because most people, by knowing that perfection's unattainable, would say, hey, why fucking bother?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so the idea is just, you know, the improvement process itself is like the thing I really love watching, right? Because you see it and you're like, man, this is just such a last year versus this year, man, this is such a different business, and you see it, just the company's in a different place. I mean,
Yeah.
you turn and then, you know, the staff turns over, and then that's painful too, you know, because you get to grow to like some people, but maybe they're not a fit anymore. It's just like, you know, but like you get used to that too. I remember when like hiring and firing was like just a monumental event. There, you remember the stuff, right? We were starting. I mean, now it's just
Held
like,
on too long sometimes.
sure, but now you look at this and you go like, yeah, but now it's just like if you know, if somebody's here for a long time, you almost question why.
Mm,
You know, like, right? So it's a question, meaning that like if they're here, there better be a really good reason for them and for you. It has to make
right.
sense. It has to make sense, and you as a business have to understand that, right? Because new fresh blood is important. New perspectives are important, right? But also it means a lot of times, like especially in you know, we've experienced this when you have people and you know when you just that are there for a long time in companies that don't really have any metrics and don't really have good infrastructure. They're there because you can't measure their performance, and they're there because there is just no way to manage them out. Basically, there's no way to like
Yeah.
hold them accountable for anything.
Yeah.
You know, and you don't realize that they don't provide you any value, and then they don't realize that they're stuck in a place that they don't really grow anyway.
Yeah. They
You
themselves are
know,
miserable. They're afraid to go, and there's plenty of motivations not to leave.
No, maybe it's not even that. They're just comfortable. The comfort's actually the number one
I don't like
killer.
comfort. I'm not a fan of comfort.
Now
Yeah,
you realize it. Once you get like to the age of 40, right, you start looking at it differently. You start looking at life just as as like comfort becomes the enemy of it. Because you're like, because there's like between the ages of 20 and 40, you're like kind of like seeking comfort the most. But like afterwards, you do, because your life's a whirlwind at that point. You get a family, you get to slow down, you got to raise more
right.
kids.
Kids are young,
Like
right? Right.
Yeah, the last thing you need is fucking more chaos. That's especially when you have the sleepless nights and all that other shit. But the idea is not that. The idea is that like comfort. But the idea of comfort, you don't want to be. It's not trying to seek discomfort for the sake of discomfort.
No.
The idea is that like comfort is the thing that stops you from seeking change or growth. I should say
growth, progress,
change
progress.
promote growth, right? And what you really want is not chaos. You want growth. You're looking for growth, and growth comes when you look at like we'll say structured discomfort, right? You're looking to structure your discomfort, and as again, once you get past the age of 40, like you're able to recognize these things a bit better.
Yeah, voluntary ventures into chaos.
Sure, that's fair. that feels like a podcast on its own.
Yeah, it's a good podcast, I'm sure.
Voluntary venture into chaos.
Yeah, why the name GildedBox?
Well, so we wanted to convey. So we wanted the packaging to be a really, really important part of the experience. We wanted to convey that, but we also wanted to. We wanted to use the word gilded or golden in this case, right? To really kind of hammer home the point that the thing you're holding, almost what's inside doesn't matter. That the thing you're holding is already special.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was deliberate. That was absolutely deliberate. The idea is that the box, the thing you're holding, is special, right? And I can take that and equate it to my customer, right? So it's a Deloitte box, and the person that's receiving it is, let's say, either Deloitte employee or Deloitte customer, and fully understand that it's very valuable. It's golden already.
Yeah, it's a good name.
Before he opens it.
It's a good name.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
At the end of every podcast, I generally ask people what book they recommend, but you've already recommended me a book, Unreasonable Hospitality, which I've read. Any other ones?
Oh man, a great question. I don't know why I'm so terrible at it. Right at this moment, I almost, it's like blank. I have so many books that I really like. Let me think. I wish I had a really good answer for this right now. Usually it's the book. This question always has recency bias attached to it. It's usually whatever the latest book I read is.
Correct.
It's like, oh man, this is a great book.
Yeah, the key is to keep reading books all the time so that you always have the latest book that's different than the one before.
Yeah, but I'm feeling really under pressure to come up with the best one right now.
That's fine. We'll put it in the show notes afterwards. You can just text me later.
Yeah, but there's so many good ones that I specifically, I guess. So here, okay, I got one. I got one that I really like, and it's going to be something a bit off the wall, I think. But I don't know if it's off the wall. It's going to be a bit unorthodox. Maybe that's the word to put it. I do have a book that I'd recommend, but it's a book for anybody specifically interested in leadership. I will also say this book rings different. I've read this book twice. When I was in my 20s once, and I couldn't remember what the fuck it was about. And I read it in my 40s, and it means everything to me. It's an old book. It was written, I believe, in 1458. So it's called Prince by Machiavelli. It's actually, that's when somebody says Machiavelli, it's like the Tupac character. It's not that guy. It's based on this guy. His name is Niccolo Machiavelli. He was an advisor to the Medici family. Which was the most powerful family at the time in Florence, and which was Tuscany. Florence was the capital of Tuscany at the time, and he specifically wrote the book Prince, or Prince is a book for the Medici patriarch who was about to become, quote unquote, a king. Right? He was a prince at the time, so he talks to him about what it takes to be a good leader. And if you read that book today, I highly recommend this. If you read this book today, I can give you this. So the key is to find a really good translation. It's probably a 2-day read. It's actually very short. But it's you got to find a good translation where it's because it's written in Latin, French, I believe, at the time. Latin. Niccolo Machiavelli is Italian. But there is a lot of French influence in Italy. Italy actually became this is a side quest here, but Italy became it's one of the last countries in modern Europe to become a full country. Not until middle of 1800s did it actually become like Italy. Maybe late 1800s, if I remember correctly. Because before that, it was all like different. Yeah, that's why Italy was invaded from every possible, because they were never one country. They kept fighting between themselves. Pisa was a separate, thing. Tuscany and Florence was its own government.
Rome, all that.
All of it was separate. It was all separate, and they all had their own, their own leaders and their own kingdom, so to speak, their own governing bodies. And they would always, the Spanish would invade, the French would invade, the Germans would invade, and they would all align themselves, one against the other. It was quite a mess actually for quite a while.
Interesting.
Yeah.
If,
But in any case,
if only they can keep a gas station open during lunch hours, maybe I would have asked somebody when I was there, but nobody was available.
they do it. You just do it in Milan. You got to do it in northern Italy.
I got it.
In northern Italy, those are open during lunchtime.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I highly recommend Niccolo Machiavelli's Prince. I believe it's what is it, a 500-year-old book at this point? More, shit, 550. And it's amazing. It's amazing how it's just like you read and you think, oh man, no, people are different. They've changed. They have not.
Mm-hmm.
Everything in the book rings true. So if you want to be a good leader, if you want to learn what it takes to be a leader, what it takes to actually build something, because this is it's so applicable to building a company and understanding how people will follow you. I recommend it in general. I think actually for you it'd be great, man. Just as a you'll recognize a lot of stuff in there that you've probably seen in your days as the CEO of PaperTube, and you're like, oh man, this is exactly what people behave like, and this is how I can control the crowd. This is how I can actually get them to behave a certain way, right? It's brilliant. It really is. So Niccolo Machiavelli, Prince.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Russell. It's been great. I don't have any more questions.
Great, man. Thank you for having me on.
I think we'll probably have another hour and a half or two to talk about other things, because there's plenty of other things we can talk about.
I actually really enjoyed this. This is my first one of these, probably at this length. I'll say I've done a few other ones. It's just never been this long. But this is the reason this is so long is I didn't realize the time's gone by so much.
No, it was a lot of great info. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
See ya.
Good to see you. Bye.